Hey folks, welcome back for another grammar lesson. This video is going to build on grammatical concepts that I've introduced in previous videos. I'll include links to those down in the description, so feel free to pause at any point and review those briefly and come back to this. Or watch this through and then go back and review anything you noticed you were rusty on afterward. Whatever works best for you. Every learner is different. In my lesson introducing pronouns, I discussed subject and object pronouns. This video will focus on the ways that objects function in clauses and sentences. The basic idea is that the subject is who or what is doing the action. The object is who or what is being affected by the action. There are three kinds of objects: direct objects, indirect objects, and objects of prepositions. Direct and indirect objects only occur in sentences or clauses that use an action verb. Linking verbs don't use objects. Therefore, finding the action verb can be helpful in identifying whether it has an object and, if so, what the object is. You can find more support on action and linking verbs in my video, Action and Linking Verbs, but mostly linking verbs. Let's look at some examples. The shortstop throws the ball. In this sentence, the subject is the noun shortstop, and the shortstop does something, which helps us identify throws as the action verb. This sentence is pretty basic, and so, since it's not very long, it's pretty easy to find the direct object, because all that's left is the ball. But we can check to see if that's the direct object by saying the action verb and then asking who or what. So, throws who or what? Answer, the ball. We often phrase it as the direct object receiving the action of the verb. In this sentence, the shortstop is the one doing the throwing, the ball is what gets thrown. Here are some additional basic examples. The students are asking questions. The dog chews its toy. The nurse checks my aunt's blood pressure. The toddler pokes her baby brother. In each of those sentences, noun phrases have been used for both the subject and the direct object. Remember, though, that nouns and noun phrases can be replaced with pronouns. Let's take a look at that final example again. The toddler pokes her baby brother. If we replace the noun phrases with pronouns, we might end up with a sentence like this. She pokes him curiously. So the noun phrase, the toddler, is replaced with the subject pronoun, she, and the direct object is replaced with the object pronoun, him. This really only makes a difference with first and third person singular and plural pronouns, as they're the only ones that change form, depending on whether they're used as the subject or the object. You can review this concept in my video, Basic Grammar in English, first, second, and third person. Look at what happens if the baby is the one poking the toddler. He pokes her curiously. If you grew up speaking English as your first language, chances are good that you use sentences like this without really thinking about them. I've never seen these errors in student writing. Her pokes he curiously, or him pokes she curiously. However, I do tend to see problems when the direct object is a phrase that includes a noun and a pronoun. Students often take the rule about compound subjects and use it here when it doesn't apply. Take a look at this sentence. Me and my brother watched our cousin. The phrase used as a subject should be my brother and I, making the sentence, my brother and I watched our cousin. However, when the cousin is doing the watching, students often write the sentence this way. My cousin watched me and my brother. This is not grammatically correct in dominant English, but only because of the order of the direct objects in the phrase. But, remembering the rule for compound subjects, students correct this to, my cousin watched my brother and I. I am so proud of you for making that effort. But no, not quite. Instead, it ought to be, my cousin watched my brother and me. That's actually correct for dominant English. Just like with a compound subject, the way to check this is to remove the noun and use the sentence with just the pronoun in that spot. I watched my cousin shows that it should be, my brother and I watched our cousin. My cousin watched me shows that it should be, my cousin watched my brother and me. You also need to pay attention to the order of the elements. Something else you should notice is that in statements, the subject always comes first, then the verb or verb phrase, then the direct object. Questions almost always change a simple verb into a verb phrase and put the subject after the first helping verb. Let's look at that first example, phrased as a question in different ways. Is the shortstop throwing the ball? In this question, the verb throws changes to the verb phrase is throwing, but the subject is still shortstop and the direct object is still the ball. Why is the shortstop throwing the ball? Here, the word why has been used as an adverb at the beginning of the question. Notice that everything else stays the same. The subject is still shortstop, the direct object is still the ball, and we still have the verb phrase is throwing. When did the shortstop throw the ball? In this example, the word when is the adverb that introduces the question. The verb phrase this time is did throw, but again, the subject and direct object are the same as before. Hopefully, those three examples help you to understand that questions are a little different from statements, But there's still a pattern to them, and once you're familiar with it, finding the subject and direct object is not difficult. So now let's take a look at statements that are a little more involved. This tree loses its leaves every winter. Here, the action is the simple verb loses. What is losing something? The tree. That's the subject. What is the tree losing? Its leaves. That's the direct object. Athletes in training lift weights to get stronger. In this sentence, the action is the simple verb lift. Who's lifting? Athletes. That's the subject. What are they lifting? Weights. That's the direct object. The students are asking questions about the test. As before, we have the verb phrase are asking. The students are doing the asking, so that's the subject. What are they asking? Questions. That's the direct object. So in these cases, we can still see the order of subject, verb, direct object in the sentence, although there are other words or phrases that add more detail. Let's take a look at indirect objects. Sentences that have direct objects sometimes also have indirect objects. Just as the direct object receives the action of the verb, the indirect object receives the action of the direct object. Let's consider some examples. We'll start with our shortstop, who we'll call Thompson. Now, it's possible that there was an extra ball out on the field, and she just wanted to make sure it was out of the way. But it's much more likely that she's actually throwing it to another player, maybe the catcher, Jones, so he can tag the runner who's about to try to slide across home plate. That sentence would be, Thompson threw Jones the ball. So Thompson is still the shortstop and the subject of the sentence. In this version, we're using the past tense verb threw instead of the present tense form throws. The ball is still the direct object, and the catcher, Jones, is supposed to receive the ball, which makes him the indirect object. In another of our early examples, the students are asking questions about the test. We could add an indirect object by considering who would be receiving the direct object, questions. That might give us a sentence such as this one. The students are asking the teacher questions about the test, which shows that the indirect object is the teacher. Just like we saw with the subject, verb, and direct object, a clause or sentence with an indirect object also follows a specific order. The indirect object is always placed after the verb, but before the direct object. Here are some additional examples. She brought her friend a snack. I'll make you an offer you can't refuse. The principal has given us permission to hold a fundraiser. Show me the money. Each of these examples illustrates the same order: subject, verb, indirect object, direct object. Keeping this in mind will help you identify and use these grammatical elements effectively. One last point on direct and indirect objects. They will never be in a prepositional phrase. For indirect objects in particular, it's possible to express the idea using a prepositional phrase, but in that case, they're not classified as indirect objects, but as objects of a preposition. That brings us to the third use of objects: prepositional phrases as objects of a preposition. Prepositional phrases can add details in a variety of ways. I introduced prepositions in an earlier video that I've linked down in the description, so you can use that for review or support. A noun or pronoun used as an indirect object can also be used in a prepositional phrase instead. Let's see what happens with some of the previous examples. She brought a snack to her friend. I'll make an offer you can't refuse to you. The principal has given permission to us to hold a fundraiser. Show the money to me. These prepositional phrases will always begin with the word to, based on how they function in the sentence. As we see in the last two examples, when pronouns are used as the object of the preposition, they use the object case. We can see this when we use a pronoun for the object in the first example in that set. She brought a snack to him. Because this type of sentence is pretty common, we can hear a problem if we use the subject or possessive pronoun instead of the object pronoun. Students don't often use, she brought a snack to he, or she brought a snack to his. Along the same lines, any pronoun used as the object of a preposition should be in the objective case. Let's take a look at how changing a noun to a pronoun illustrates this. We waited beside Josh. We waited beside him. Brianna sat between the two puppies. Brianna sat between them. Additionally, rewriting the sentence so that the object of the preposition becomes the subject highlights the way subject and object pronouns work. We waited beside Josh. Josh waited beside us. She, Brianna, sat between them, the puppies. They sat around her. We can do the same thing to see how a first-person pronoun changes case depending on how it's used. Subject, I have a book. Indirect object, the librarian gave me a book. Object of a preposition, the librarian gave a book to me. Almost done. All I want to do now is review. First of all, subjects and objects are not parts of speech, but elements of structure. Any part of speech that can function as a noun can be used either as a subject or object. This includes nouns, pronouns, gerunds, infinitives, as well as phrases for each of those parts of speech. Second, First and third person pronouns change form, depending on whether they're used as subject or object. Second person pronouns use the same form in both subject and object case. Third, the three types of objects in a clause or sentence are direct objects, indirect objects, and objects of prepositions. Thanks for watching. Remember to check the description for links to other videos that touch on these concepts. And if you have any questions, I'd love to see them down in the comments. Bye for now.